4 coins that look like ordinary pocket change, but they're hiding secrets worth jaw-dropping amounts. From the Grand Canyon to the Blue Ridge Parkway, from North Dakota's bison to Virginia's colonial ships, rare errors and fierce collector demand have turned these quarters into treasures. Could one be sitting in your change right now? Step 1. The United States 2010 Grand Canyon National Park $quarter coin is one of those extraordinary pieces of American currency that seems, at first glance, to be nothing more than pocket change you'd hand over without a second thought. But the deeper you dig into its story, the more you realize this small copper-nickel disc carries the weight of an entire national legacy on its face. Released on September 20, 2010, as the 4th coin in the America the Beautiful Quarters program, this particular issue was struck at the Philadelphia Mint facility and designed by United States Mint Artistic Infusion Program Associate Designer Phoebe Hemphill, who sculpted and engraved the reverse design herself, depicting a meticulously detailed view of the granaries above the Colorado River, nestled within the towering canyon walls that have captivated visitors for generations. The obverse, of course, retains the familiar portrait of George Washington, but it's the reverse that commands attention, with its dramatic perspective looking upward through the canyon's layered rock formations toward the ancient stone structures that native peoples used for storing grain, a scene so rich in texture and depth that you can almost feel the dry desert air rising off the metal surface when you tilt it under the right light. What most people don't realize is that this design was selected from a highly competitive internal process at the Mint, and Hemphill's interpretation was chosen specifically because it conveyed a sense of scale and reverence that other proposed designs simply couldn't match, making this coin not just a piece of currency, but a miniature monument to one of the most awe-inspiring natural wonders on Earth. And that artistic intention alone sets the stage for why certain examples of this coin have become so fiercely sought after by collectors who understand what they're truly holding. The minting context of the 2010 Grand Canyon Quarter adds another layer of intrigue that most casual observers would never suspect, because while the Philadelphia and Denver mints produced these coins in enormous quantities for general circulation, the real story begins with the much smaller production runs at the San Francisco facility, where specially struck proof versions were manufactured for collector sets. And it is within these tightly controlled strikes that some of the most remarkable and valuable variations have been identified by numismatists over the past decade and a half. The coin itself weighs 5.67 grams, measures 24.3 millimeters in diameter, and is composed of a clad sandwich of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving it that characteristic silvery appearance with a faintly warm undertone when viewed in natural sunlight. But collectors who specialize in this series know that the proof strikes from San Francisco exhibit a dramatically different visual character, with deeply mirrored fields and frosted relief elements that create a cameo-like contrast, so striking it almost feels three-dimensional in your hand. The Grand Canyon design, with its intricate layering of rock strata and the tiny granary structures rendered in astonishing detail for such a small canvas, becomes almost hypnotic under magnification. And that's precisely where the hunt begins, because the finer the strike and the more pristine the surface, the more the coin transcends its face value and enters the realm of genuine treasure. A transformation that has quietly unfolded in auction houses and private collections across the country since the coin first entered circulation more than 15 years ago. What makes this particular quarter so compelling from a rarity standpoint is not that it is scarce in absolute terms, since millions were produced for everyday use, but rather that finding one in truly exceptional condition, free from the scratches, bag marks, and circulation where that typically degrade these coins within weeks of leaving the mint, is astonishingly difficult. And this is where the emotional pull of the hunt begins to tighten its grip on anyone who has ever sifted through a jar of old coins, wondering, whether something extraordinary might be hiding in plain sight. The clad composition, while durable, is also surprisingly susceptible to tunning and discoloration over time, meaning that a coin stored improperly in a humid environment can develop unsightly spots or an uneven golden-brown patina that destroys its collector value, while a coin that happened to land in a mint-sewn plastic holder or a sealed mint set and was kept in a cool, dry place might retain its original brilliance with such perfection that it appears to have been struck yesterday. This element of chance, this lottery-like quality where the difference between a 30-cent coin and a life-changing collectible comes down to where it happened to sit for the last 15 years, is exactly the kind of narrative tension that keeps collectors awake at night, turning their flashlights on jars of inherited coins, examining each one under a loupe with the quiet hope that the next flip might reveal something extraordinary. The notable errors associated with the 2010 Grand Canyon Quarter represent some of the most fascinating and potentially lucrative discoveries in the entire America the Beautiful series, because the sheer volume of coins being produced at the Philadelphia and Denver facilities during this period meant that die varieties, strike anomalies, and manufacturing imperfections occasionally slipped through quality control and entered circulation undetected. And some of these have since been documented and cataloged by specialists who have spent years building comprehensive reference guides for collectors. Among the most talked about variations are instances of die cracking visible on the reverse around the granary structures, where hairline fractures in the die itself left raised lines of metal on the finished coin that look like tiny rivers cutting through the canyon walls. And while these might seem like flaws to an untrained eye, to a knowledgeable collector, they are fingerprints of the minting process, evidence of a die that was pushed past its intended lifespan and into the realm of historical artifact. There are also documented cases of off-center strikes, where the planchet was not perfectly aligned when the dies came together, resulting in a portion of the design being missing and a crescent of blank metal visible along one edge. And these dramatic visual anomalies are among the most sought-after pieces in the error coin community, because they are immediately recognizable even to non-specialists and carry an unmistakable sense of the dramatic, a frozen moment where the immense mechanical force of the coining press met an imperfection in the process and created something genuinely unique. Letter doubling is another critical area of examination for anyone serious about identifying a potentially valuable 2010 Grand Canyon Quarter. And this is where patience and a good magnifying glass become your most important tools, because double die errors on this issue, while rare, have been reported on both the obverse and reverse, with the most notable examples showing slight but unmistakable separation in the letters of In God We Trust and EPLURIBUSUNUM, where the die was hubbed more than once at slightly different angles, creating a ghost-like shadow beneath the primary lettering that becomes clearly visible under 5 to 10 times magnification. Collectors should also pay close attention to the weight of any suspect coin, because a genuine clad quarter should register precisely at 5.67 grams on a calibrated digital scale, and any significant deviation from that figure could indicate either a planchet error, where the wrong type or thickness of metal blank was fed into the press, or worse, a counterfeit, which is an increasingly real concern in the modern numismatic marketplace, as sophisticated bad actors have begun producing convincing fakes of even relatively modern coins. The color of a genuine uncirculated example should be a uniform silver-white with no signs of copper breakthrough at the edges, and the strike alignment should be precise, with the obverse and reverse designs oriented exactly 180 degrees apart, known as coin alignment. So any rotation or misalignment between the two faces is an immediate red flag that warrants professional evaluation before any transaction is considered. As we move into the discussion of value, it's important to understand that the market for exceptional 2010 Grand Canyon quarters has been building steadily for years, and documented collector and auction results have established a clear and compelling upward progression that transforms what was once a 25-cent piece into something that could genuinely alter the course of a person's financial life. Minor variations, including lightly circulated examples with attractive tunning or modest die cracks that add character without compromising the overall visual appeal, have been documented at collector prices in the range of $2,500 to $3,500. And while that might seem remarkable for a modern clad quarter, it reflects the reality that collectors of the America the Beautiful series are a dedicated and growing community. And they are willing to pay significant premiums for coins that tell a story beyond their face value. High-grade examples, particularly those certified at MS67 or PR69 DCAM levels by major grading services like PCGS or NGC, have crossed the auction block at approximately $5,000, a figure that represents not just the coin itself, but the extraordinary difficulty of finding one in that condition. Given that the clad surface is so prone to contact marks and surface imperfections, that achieving such a high grade is akin to finding a flawless diamond in a riverbed, a once-in-a-lifetime discovery that most collectors will never experience despite years of searching. The upper tiers of this market are where the narrative truly becomes cinematic, because unusual mint anomalies, such as significant off-center strikes or coins struck on incorrect planchets, have been documented at auction results approaching $6,000, and desirable collector pieces with verified provenance and exceptional eye appeal have reached approximately $7,500. Figures that begin to feel less like coin prices and more like an unexpected financial windfall dropped into your lap from the most unlikely of sources. Exceptionally preserved or uncommon examples, including proof coins with deep cameo contrast that have been graded at the very top of the scale and carry population reports in the single digits, have been recorded at values around $8,000, and unusual finds with strong collector demand, such as newly discovered double die varieties that have been formally listed in specialist references, have pushed toward $8,500, creating a situation where a single coin discovered in an inherited collection or a long-forgotten bankroll could represent the kind of money that people save for years to accumulate. A home down payment sitting quietly in a drawer, unrecognized and unappreciated until the moment someone picks it up, turns it to the light, and realizes that what they are holding is far more than pocket change. At the very pinnacle of this market, extraordinary or historically significant examples, including coins with impeccable documentation connecting them to specific mint events or major collections, have reached documented values approaching $9,000, though it must be emphasized with absolute clarity that these values represent documented collector or auction results where applicable and are never guaranteed, as the numismatic market, like any market, fluctuates based on demand, availability, and the ever-shifting passions of the collecting community. Before any sale or purchase is contemplated, professional authentication is not just recommended but absolutely essential, because the stakes are simply too high, and the potential for costly mistakes too real to rely on untrained judgment alone, and this means submitting any suspect coin to a reputable third-party grading service such as PCGS, NGC, or ANACS, where trained numismatists will examine the coin's weight, metal composition, color, strike alignment, rim shape, and letter doubling under controlled conditions, and with specialized equipment that can detect even the most sophisticated counterfeits. Examine the rim carefully, because a genuine clad quarter should have a uniform edge with no seams, no casting marks, and no evidence of electroplating. And the reading, while present on most quarters, should be consistent and evenly spaced, while the lettering should be sharp and well-defined with no softness or mushiness that might indicate a cast copy rather than a genuine struck coin. Hold the coin at an angle under a single light source and look across the surface for any hairline scratches, cleaning marks, or evidence of artificial tunning, because these subtle imperfections can dramatically affect value and are often invisible to the naked eye, requiring at minimum a 5-power loupe and ideally a stereo microscope for thorough evaluation. And remember that the difference between a coin worth a few dollars and one worth several thousand can come down to details so fine that even experienced collectors routinely seek second opinions before committing to a purchase. The 2010 Grand Canyon National Park Quarter is a coin that rewards patience, knowledge, and a willingness to look beyond the obvious. And for those who are willing to learn its secrets, it offers the tantalizing possibility that something extraordinary might be waiting in the most ordinary of places. But the story doesn't end here, because there is another coin from this remarkable series, one with an even more astonishing history, an even more dramatic design, and a market that has produced results so extraordinary that even seasoned collectors were left speechless when the hammer finally fell. And that is the story we will uncover next. Step 2. The United States 2006 North Dakota State $quarter coin looks so unremarkable at first glance that you could easily spend it at a coffee shop without ever knowing what you just let slip through your fingers. And that is precisely what makes this coin one of the most quietly devastating pieces in the entire state quarters program, because beneath its ordinary copper-nickel surface lies a story of artistic ambition, manufacturing complexity, and a handful of production anomalies that have quietly turned a few lucky holders into people who walked away with life-changing money from what appeared to be nothing more than a quarter from their pocket change. Released into circulation on August 28, 2006, as the 39th coin in the landmark 50-state series that ran from 1999 through 2008, the North Dakota quarter features a reverse design depicting two grazing American bison standing before a sun-bleached skyline of the Badlands, with the rugged buttes and layered sedimentary formations rendered in remarkable detail for such a small canvas, accompanied by the inscriptions North Dakota and 1889, the year the state was admitted to the Union. The design was created by United States Mint sculptor engraver Donna Weaver, who faced the formidable challenge of capturing the sweeping grandeur of one of America's most geologically dramatic landscapes within a space barely larger than a postage stamp. And her solution was to focus on the bison as the emotional anchor of the composition, using their massive forms to draw the viewer's eye into the scene, while the Badlands stretch behind them in diminishing layers of texture that suggest an almost impossible depth on a coin measuring just 24.3 millimeters across. The obverse retains the standard George Washington portrait designed by John Flanagan, but collectors who specialize in this series know that the real drama lives on the reverse, where the interaction between the bison, the landscape, and the inscriptions created a set of manufacturing conditions that would produce some of the most sought-after variations in the entire program. And the story of how those variations came to exist is where this coin transforms from a curiosity into something genuinely extraordinary. The minting context of the 2006 North Dakota quarter is essential to understanding why certain examples have become so valuable, because while the Denver and Philadelphia mints collectively produced hundreds of millions of these coins for circulation, the production process itself was under enormous pressure during this period, as the mint was simultaneously striking coins for multiple states in the program, managing unprecedented public demand, and dealing with the logistical challenges of maintaining die quality across extended production runs that sometimes stretched for months without interruption. The coin weighs exactly 5.67 grams and is composed of the standard clad sandwich construction, with outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, giving it the familiar silver-white appearance that most Americans would recognize instantly. But what most people never consider is that this composition, while functional for everyday commerce, creates a specific set of vulnerabilities and characteristics that collectors have learned to scrutinize with extraordinary precision. The clad surface, for instance, is remarkably sensitive to the conditions under which the coin is struck, meaning that variations in die pressure, planchet preparation, and striking temperature can produce visible differences in the sharpness of the bison's fur texture, the definition of the Badlands rock layers, and the clarity of the small inscriptions that frame the design. And these subtle differences, invisible to someone who simply receives the coin in change at a grocery store, become the defining features that separate a common example from one that commands serious money in the collector marketplace. The San Francisco Mint also produced proof versions of this coin for collector sets, and these proofs, with their mirror-like fields and frosted relief, represent a completely different visual experience that can almost feel like looking at a different coin entirely. But the circulation strikes from Denver and Philadelphia are where the most dramatic and valuable discoveries have been made, often by people who had no idea what they were looking at until someone else pointed it out to them. Sometimes years after the coin had already passed through dozens of hands. The rarity story of the 2006 North Dakota quarter is not about scarcity in the traditional sense, because the raw mintage numbers are enormous, and the coin remains common in circulated condition, but rather about the extraordinary difficulty of finding one in a condition and configuration that elevates it above the millions of ordinary examples. And this is where the narrative takes on an emotional dimension that resonates with anyone who has ever wondered whether they overlooked something valuable in their daily life. Consider the fact that these coins entered circulation at a time when Americans were actively collecting the state quarter series in unprecedented numbers, with millions of people saving folders, maps, and albums filled with examples pulled from pocket change. And yet, despite this massive wave of public attention, virtually nobody was examining their North Dakota quarters under magnification or paying attention to the minute details that would later distinguish the truly exceptional pieces from the merely ordinary. There are documented cases of collectors who received these coins in bank rolls, glanced at them long enough to confirm the design, and then filed them away in albums where they sat for years, completely unaware that the specific example they were holding exhibited a die variety or strike anomaly that would later be recognized as one of the most significant discoveries in the series. And the moment of realization, when it finally came, often arrived not through careful examination, but through a chance encounter with an article, a video, or a conversation with another collector that prompted a second look. A second look that revealed something astonishing had been sitting in a cardboard folder on a bookshelf the entire time, waiting to be recognized for what it truly was. The known errors and varieties associated with the 2006 North Dakota quarter form a catalog of manufacturing imperfections that reads like a detective story, because each one represents a specific moment in the production process where something went slightly wrong. And those small wrongs created coins that are now fiercely pursued by specialists who have spent years building detailed reference guides and population reports to track every known example. Among the most discussed variations are instances of die deterioration doubling, a phenomenon distinct from true doubled die errors, where the repeated striking of coins causes the die face to gradually degrade and push metal into the lettering and design elements, creating a shelf-like or stepped appearance on the inscriptions that can be mistaken for a true doubled die by inexperienced observers, but is actually evidence of a die that was used well beyond its intended service life. There are also documented cases of significant die cracks running through the reverse design, particularly through the body of the foreground bison and across the Badlands formations, where the stress fractures in the die left raised lines of metal on the finished coins that trace the path of the crack like a river carved into the surface. And these cracks, which would have been invisible to mint workers focused on production quotas, are now treated as diagnostic features that help specialists identify specific die states and production sequences. More dramatically, there are verified reports of coins struck on incorrect planchets, including examples struck on planchets intended for foreign coinage or on clipped planchets, where the metal blank was incompletely punched from the strip, leaving a crescent-shaped void along one edge that makes the coin look as though a bite has been taken out of it. And these dramatic visual errors are among the most immediately recognizable and emotionally compelling pieces in the entire error coin community, because they tell a story of industrial chaos that anyone can understand at a glance. Letter doubling is a particularly critical area of examination for the 2006 North Dakota quarter, and collectors should approach this with both patience and the right equipment, because the difference between a genuine doubled die variety worth significant money and a common instance of die deterioration doubling worth almost nothing can come down to details so subtle that they require at minimum a 7-power loop and ideally a stereo microscope to properly evaluate. And even experienced collectors frequently seek second opinions before committing to an identification. Look closely at the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and EPLURIBUSUNUM on the obverse, and at North Dakota and 1889 on the reverse, because true doubled die errors will show distinct and separated serifs on the letters, with a clear gap between the primary impression and the secondary impression, while die deterioration doubling will show a smoother, more blended shelf without the clean separation that indicates a true hubbing error. The weight of the coin should be checked on a calibrated digital scale and should register at exactly 5.67 grams, because any significant deviation could indicate a wrong planchet error, where the coin was struck on a blank intended for a different denomination or even a different country's coinage. And these wrong planchet errors are among the most valuable and dramatic discoveries in the series. The color should be a consistent silver white across the entire surface, with no signs of copper breakthrough at the edges, and the strike alignment should be a precise 180-degree coin rotation between obverse and reverse. So any rotational misalignment is an immediate signal that the coin requires professional evaluation, and the rim should be examined for any signs of expansion, splitting, or irregularity, because rim anomalies can indicate that the coin was struck with excessive pressure or on a planchet that was improperly prepared, and these manufacturing deviations, while subtle, can dramatically affect the coin's value and its place in the collector community. As we transition into the discussion of value, it is worth pausing to reflect on the emotional weight of what these numbers represent, because behind every documented sale, there is a human story, often one of a coin that passed through dozens of hands over years or even decades before someone finally recognized its significance. And the realization that arrives in that moment is one of the most powerful experiences in the collecting world. A sudden understanding that something you have been holding, or something you once held and let go, was far more than it appeared. Notable examples of the 2006 North Dakota quarter, including well-preserved circulation strikes with attractive original surfaces and verified die varieties that have been formally cataloged by specialist references, have been documented at collector and auction prices ranging from $5,000 to $7,000. And these figures reflect not just the rarity of the specific variety, but the growing recognition among collectors that the State Quarters series, once dismissed as too common to hold serious value, contains a handful of pieces that have quietly achieved a level of desirability that few would have predicted when the program began. Higher-grade error coins, particularly those showing significant die cracks through the bison design or clear instances of die deterioration doubling that have been authenticated and graded by major services, have been recorded at auction results approaching $8,000, and strong mint-state coins, those certified at MS66 or higher with full luster and exceptional eye appeal, have crossed the block at approximately $8,200. Numbers that begin to feel less like coin prices and more like the kind of money that could change the trajectory of a family's financial situation if discovered at the right moment. The upper tiers of this market are where the story becomes almost difficult to believe, because unusual mint mistakes, including verified off-center strikes and coins showing dramatic planchet errors, have been documented at values reaching $8,700, and major error coins, such as confirmed wrong planchet strikes where the North Dakota design was impressed onto a blank intended for a completely different denomination, have achieved auction results of approximately $9,000, figures that represent the kind of unexpected financial windfall that most people only read about in stories but never imagine happening to them. But the most extraordinary tier of all belongs to exceptionally rare documented error examples, coins with impeccable provenance, formal certification by top-tier grading services, and population reports so low that they can be counted on one hand, which have reached documented private sale and auction results approaching $35,000, a sum that represents not just a valuable coin but a life-altering discovery, the kind of money that could pay off a mortgage, fund a child's education, or provide a financial cushion that transforms a family's sense of security for generations. And yet these values, while documented and real, reflect specific auction or private sale results where applicable and are never guaranteed, because the numismatic market is a living ecosystem shaped by collector demand, economic conditions, and the ongoing discovery of new varieties that can shift the landscape without warning, before any sale or purchase is considered. Professional authentication through a reputable grading service such as PCGS, NGC, or ANACS is absolutely essential, because the financial stakes are far too high to rely on untrained judgment, and the difference between a genuine error and a convincing imitation can come down to metallurgical analysis and microscopic examination that only a professional laboratory can provide. So examine your coins carefully, weigh them precisely, study their surfaces under magnification. And remember that the most extraordinary discoveries often begin with someone simply deciding to take a second look at something they had always assumed was ordinary. And the next coin we explore may hold an even more astonishing secret, one that has been hiding in plain sight for nearly 2 decades, waiting for the right person to finally see what was there all along. Step 3. The United States 2015 North Carolina Blue Ridge Parkway $quarter coin entered circulation on January 26, 2015, as the 28th release in the America the Beautiful Quarters program, and from the moment it first appeared in cash registers and coin jars across the country, it carried with it a deceptive ordinariness that masked one of the most compelling untold stories in modern American numismatics. Because while millions of these coins were struck for everyday use, a small fraction of them harbor characteristics so unusual and so visually striking that they have quietly become some of the most aggressively pursued pieces in the entire series, and the people who find them are often the ones who least expect it. The reverse design, created by United States Mint Artistic Infusion Program designer Frank Morris, and sculpted by medallic artist Joseph Mena, depicts a graceful curved stone bridge spanning a winding mountain road, with the layered peaks of the Blue Ridge Mountains rising behind it in soft, atmospheric perspective, a composition that was specifically chosen to evoke the experience of driving along the parkway itself, where the road curves and climbs through some of the most breathtaking scenery on the eastern seaboard. The design is remarkable for its sense of motion and depth, with the stone bridge rendered in such fine detail that individual blocks are visible under magnification, and the mountains behind it fatting into layered ridges that create an almost painterly effect on the metal surface, an artistic achievement that becomes more impressive the closer you look. And that closeness is exactly where the story of this coin begins to shift from the familiar to the extraordinary. Because the very features that make the design so visually rich also created conditions during the minting process that would produce a handful of remarkable variations. And those variations are what collectors now hunt for, with an intensity that most people would never associate with a coin they could find at the bottom of a purse. The minting context of the 2015 Blue Ridge Parkway quarter is where the narrative deepens, because this coin was produced during a period when the United States Mint was operating under extraordinary strain, managing simultaneous production of circulating coinage, collector sets, and precious metal versions across multiple facilities. And the demands of this schedule meant that die maintenance and quality control were sometimes pushed to their limits, creating an environment where small imperfections could emerge and enter circulation before anyone at the mint realized what had happened. The coin itself is constructed from the standard clad composition, with outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, weighing precisely 5.67 grams and measuring 24.3 millimeters in diameter, specifications that are identical to every other quarter produced since 1965. But collectors who specialize in this series understand that identical specifications do not mean identical coins, because the way those materials respond to the striking process can vary dramatically depending on die condition, planchet preparation, and the specific press configuration used during production. The Philadelphia and Denver facilities produced the circulation strikes, while San Francisco handled the proof versions for collector sets, and it is within the circulation strikes that the most dramatic and valuable discoveries have been made, because the sheer volume of coins being produced at Philadelphia and Denver meant that dies were often used well beyond their optimal service life, and as those dies aged and deteriorated, they began to impart distinctive characteristics onto the coins they produced, characteristics that were invisible to the workers operating the presses, but that would later become the defining features that separate an ordinary quarter from one worth more than most people earn in a month. The visual appearance of the 2015 Blue Ridge Parkway quarter is one of the most underappreciated aspects of this coin, because at a casual glance it looks like any other modern quarter, with its silver-white clad surface and familiar George Washington obverse. But when you hold a truly exceptional example under proper lighting and magnification, the reverse design reveals a level of detail and artistic intention that most people will never notice. And this gap between what the coin actually contains and what most people perceive is where the emotional heart of this story lives. The stone bridge on the reverse is not simply a generic structure, but a careful representation of the type of rustic masonry architecture found along the actual parkway, where civilian Conservation Corps workers built bridges, tunnels, and overlooks during the Great Depression using locally quarried stone. And the designer's decision to feature this bridge was a deliberate homage to that history, embedding a story of human labor and perseverance into a coin that most people will only ever see as pocket change. The mountains behind the bridge are rendered with a layered effect that creates a genuine sense of atmospheric depth, with each ridgeline slightly softer than the one in front of it, mimicking the natural haze that gives the Blue Ridge Mountains their characteristic blue appearance. And this effect is achieved through extremely fine engraving that becomes visible only under magnification, meaning that the full beauty of this design is essentially hidden from anyone who doesn't take the time to look closely. And that same principle applies to the valuable varieties that have been discovered within this issue, because the features that make certain examples worth thousands of dollars are equally invisible to the unassisted eye, waiting silently for someone with the patience and knowledge to bring them into the light. The notable errors and varieties associated with the 2015 Blue Ridge Parkway quarter represent a fascinating cross-section of minting imperfections, each one telling a specific story about what can go wrong when millions of coins are being produced under tight deadlines and demanding conditions. And collectors who specialize in these varieties have built an increasingly detailed body of knowledge that continues to evolve as new examples are discovered and documented. Die cracks are among the most frequently encountered anomalies on this issue, with documented examples showing fractures running through the mountain ridges on the reverse, where the intricate engraving of the layered peaks created stress points in the die that eventually gave way under repeated striking pressure, leaving raised lines of metal on the finished coins that trace the path of the fracture like geological fault lines etched into the surface. These cracks, which would have been completely invisible to mint workers focused on production speed, are now treated as diagnostic markers that help specialists identify specific die states and track the progression of deterioration across a production run. And coins showing advanced die crack patterns, particularly those where multiple cracks converge, or where a crack passes through a critical design element like the bridge structure itself, are significantly more valuable than ordinary examples. There are also verified instances of partial collar strikes, where the coin was not fully seated within the retaining collar during the striking process, causing the rim to be incompletely formed on one side and creating an uneven, expanded edge that is immediately noticeable even without magnification. And these dramatic visual errors carry an emotional immediacy that makes them among the most compelling pieces in the error coin community, because they look wrong in a way that anyone can recognize. And that recognition carries with it the thrilling understanding that what you are holding is not supposed to exist. Letter doubling on the 2015 Blue Ridge Parkway quarter is an area that demands both careful examination and honest assessment, because the distinction between a genuine doubled die variety and the much more common die deterioration doubling can be subtle enough to trip up even experienced collectors, and the financial implications of a misidentification are significant enough that professional confirmation should always be sought before any transaction is contemplated. Examine the inscriptions on both faces of the coin under at least 7-power magnification, paying particular attention to Liberty and In God We Trust on the obverse and Blue Ridge Parkway, and North Carolina on the reverse, because a true doubled die will show clear, separated serifs with a distinct gap between the primary and secondary impressions, while die deterioration doubling will present as a smoother, shelf-like distortion without the clean separation that indicates an actual hubbing error. The weight of the coin should be verified on a calibrated digital scale and should read exactly 5.67 grams, because any meaningful deviation could signal a wrong planchet error, where the design was struck on a blank intended for a different denomination. And these dramatic errors are among the most valuable and visually striking discoveries in the entire series. The metal composition should be consistent throughout, with no signs of discoloration, pitting, or copper breakthrough at the edges that might indicate an improper planchet or a postment alteration. And the strike quality should be evaluated by examining the sharpness of the bridge stonework and the mountain ridge lines, because a weak or incomplete strike can significantly reduce value while a razor-sharp, fully impressed strike can elevate an otherwise ordinary coin into a category that collectors actively compete for at auction. The value progression of the 2015 Blue Ridge Parkway quarter is where this story takes on its most emotionally charged dimension, because the numbers that follow represent not just prices but moments of discovery, moments where someone realized that a coin they had been carrying in their pocket or storing in a jar on a shelf was worth far more than they ever imagined. And for every documented sale, there are undoubtedly stories of coins that were overlooked, spent, or lost. Opportunities that slipped away without the holder ever knowing what they had let go. Smaller errors, including circulated examples with verified die cracks or modest die deterioration doubling that has been authenticated by a recognized grading service, have been documented at collector and auction prices ranging from $3,000 to $6,000. And these figures already represent a remarkable transformation for a coin that was originally worth 25 cents. A transformation that speaks to the power of knowledge and the willingness to look closely at something that everyone else takes for granted. Unusual discoveries, such as coins with verified partial collar strikes or other distinctive rim anomalies that have been formally cataloged, have reached approximately $6,500, and premium high-grade examples, particularly those certified at MS67 or higher with full original luster and exceptional eye appeal, have crossed the auction block at around $7,000. Numbers that begin to feel less like coin prices and more like the kind of money that arrives at exactly the right moment in a person's life. The kind of money that pays for a long-postponed medical procedure, covers a semester of tuition, or simply provides a cushion of security that most people spend years trying to build. The upper tiers of this market are where the narrative becomes almost cinematic in its intensity, because significant error coins, including confirmed wrong planchet strikes or examples with dramatic and visually unmistakable manufacturing anomalies, have been recorded at auction results approaching $8,000, and exceptional mint state errors, those rare pieces that combine a significant production mistake with pristine surface condition and full luster, have achieved documented values of approximately $8,600, representing a category of coin so unusual that most collectors will go their entire lives without ever encountering one in person. Rare misstrikes, including off-center strikes where the design is visibly displaced from the center of the planchet, have reached values around $9,000, and at the very summit of this market, extraordinary documented examples with impeccable provenance, formal certification by top-tier grading services, and population reports so low that each known example can be individually accounted for, have achieved auction and private sale results approaching $11,000. A sum that for many people represents the kind of money that could refinance a struggling small business, cover a down payment on a home in many parts of the country, or provide a financial turning point that reshapes the trajectory of an entire family. These values reflect documented auction or collector sales where applicable and are never guaranteed, because the numismatic marketplace, like any market, is subject to fluctuations driven by collector demand, economic conditions, and the ongoing discovery of new varieties that can reshape the landscape without warning. And anyone considering a purchase or sale based on these figures should approach the transaction with the understanding that values can rise and fall, and that the only true measure of a coin's worth is what a willing buyer and a willing seller agree upon at a specific moment in time. Professional authentication through a reputable grading service such as PCGS, NGC, or ANACS is absolutely essential before any significant transaction, because the financial stakes are far too high to rely on untrained judgment. And the difference between a genuine error and a convincing postman alteration can come down to microscopic examination and metallurgical analysis that only a professional laboratory can provide. So weigh your coins carefully, examine their surfaces under magnification, study their rims for any signs of expansion or irregularity, and remember that the most extraordinary discoveries often begin with nothing more than a decision to look at something ordinary with fresh eyes. And the next coin we uncover carries a secret so deeply embedded in its design that even the most experienced collectors were stunned when the truth finally emerged, a revelation that redefined what was possible in the world of modern American coinage. Step 4. The United States 2000p Virginia State $quarter coin arrived in the hands of Americans on October 16, 2000, as the 10th entry in the wildly popular state quarters program, and from the very first day it entered circulation, it carried a deceptive plainness that fooled almost everyone who encountered it, because while collectors were busy hunting for the next great rarity in the series, this particular issue was quietly developing a reputation among specialists as one of the most complex and misunderstood coins in the entire 50-state run. A coin whose surface tells a story of colonial ambition and maritime courage, while simultaneously hiding a catalog of manufacturing anomalies that most people have never even heard of. The reverse design, created by United States Mint sculptor engraver John Mercanti, depicts the three ships that carried English settlers to Jamestown in 1607, the Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and the Discovery, rendered in side profile with their sails fully rigged and catching an invisible wind, their hulls cutting through stylized waves that suggest the vast and terrifying ocean those early colonists crossed to reach a land they knew almost nothing about. The composition of the scene is striking for its sense of forward motion, with the three vessels arranged in a diagonal progression that pulls the eye from left to right, creating a feeling of momentum and purpose that mirrors the historical event it commemorates, and the inscriptions, Jamestown 1607-2007, and Virginia, frame the ships with a formality that grounds the design in historical significance. But what most people never realize is that the intricate rigging lines, the delicate sail textures, and the fine wave patterns created some of the most demanding engraving work in the entire State Quarters series. And that complexity is precisely what set the stage for the remarkable errors that would later emerge from this production run. Errors that have transformed a handful of these coins into objects of genuine desire among collectors who understand what they are looking at. The minting context of the 2000p Virginia quarter is essential to understanding why this coin has become such a focal point for error specialists, because the Philadelphia Mint, where this coin was struck, was operating at near capacity during the year 2000, simultaneously producing circulating coinage for multiple states in the program, manufacturing collector sets, and dealing with the logistical pressures of the new millennium, all while trying to maintain the die quality standards that the program's enormous public following demanded. The coin weighs exactly 5.67 grams and consists of the standard clad construction, with outer layers of 75% copper and 25% nickel bonded to a pure copper core, producing the familiar silver-white surface that most Americans recognize without a second thought. But beneath that ordinary appearance lies a set of manufacturing realities that collectors have spent years decoding. The Philadelphia Mint produced over 943 million Virginia quarters for circulation, a staggering figure that would seem to eliminate any possibility of rarity. But the reality is that this enormous production run is exactly what created the conditions for significant die deterioration, because the sheer volume of coins being struck meant that dies were pushed far beyond their intended lifespan. And as those dies aged, cracked, and degraded, they began producing coins with increasingly distinctive characteristics that were completely invisible to the workers operating the presses, but that now serve as the diagnostic markers separating ordinary examples from the ones that command extraordinary prices in today's marketplace. The visual characteristics of the 2000p Virginia quarter reward close examination in ways that most people will never experience, because the rigging details on the three ships are so finely rendered that under proper magnification they reveal individual rope lines and sail seams that almost seem too intricate for a mass-produced circulating coin. And this level of detail is what makes the difference between a well-struck example and a weakly struck one so dramatic and so consequential for collectors. A fully struck Virginia quarter will show complete rigging lines connecting the masts to the hulls, crisp wave patterns with individual crests visible, and sharp lettering on all inscriptions, while a weakly struck example will show softness in the rigging, incomplete wave detail, and mushy letters that suggest the dies were not fully impressed into the planchet. And this distinction matters enormously because collectors will pay significant premiums for examples that display the full intended detail of Mercanti's design. The color of a genuine uncirculated example should be a bright, uniform silver white with no signs of tunning, discoloration, or copper breakthrough at the edges, and the surfaces should display full mint luster, that characteristic cartwheel effect that appears when the coin is tilted under a light source, caused by the radial flow lines imprinted during the striking process, and any interruption to that luster, whether from contact marks, cleaning, or environmental damage, can dramatically affect the coin's desirability and value. which is why so many collectors have learned to examine these surfaces with the kind of obsessive attention that most people would reserve for examining a diamond or a precious gemstone. The notable errors and varieties associated with the 2000p Virginia quarter constitute one of the most actively researched areas in the entire state quarters series, because the combination of high production volume, complex reverse engraving, and the demanding schedule of the program created an environment where mistakes were not just possible but virtually inevitable. And over the past 2.5 decades, specialists have documented a growing catalog of varieties that ranges from subtle to spectacular. Die cracks are among the most commonly encountered anomalies, with documented examples showing fractures running through the ship's sails, across the wave patterns, and through the lettering, where the stress of repeated striking eventually caused the die face to split, leaving raised lines of metal on the finished coins that trace the path of the fracture with extraordinary precision. These cracks are particularly significant when they pass through major design elements, because they create a visual interruption that is both diagnostic and aesthetically compelling. And collectors have been known to pay substantial premiums for examples where the crack creates a dramatic visual effect, such as a line that appears to extend a ship's mast or bisect the hull in a way that transforms the design into something unexpected and memorable. More dramatic still are the verified reports of off-center strikes, where the planchet was not properly seated in the collar during the striking process, causing the design to be impressed off to one side and leaving a crescent of blank metal visible along the edge. And these visually arresting errors carry an immediate emotional impact because they look unmistakably wrong, even to someone who knows nothing about coins. And that visceral recognition is part of what makes them so desirable to collectors who understand that a genuine manufacturing accident, properly documented and preserved, can become a treasure of genuine historical significance. Letter doubling is perhaps the most scrutinized aspect of the 2000p Virginia quarter, and it is also the area where collectors most frequently make mistakes, because the distinction between a true doubled die variety and the far more common die deterioration doubling requires both knowledge and the right equipment to properly evaluate, and the financial consequences of a misidentification can be severe enough to turn an exciting discovery into a painful disappointment. Examine the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, Virginia, and EPLURIBUSUNUM under at least 7-power magnification, looking for clear, separated serifs with a distinct gap between the primary and secondary impressions, because a genuine doubled die will show this clean separation while die deterioration doubling will present as a smoother, blended shelf, without the crisp division that indicates an actual hubbing error. The strike alignment should be checked by holding the coin face up, noting the orientation of the obverse design, then flipping it vertically to examine the reverse, because a properly struck coin should show a 180-degree rotation between the two faces, and any deviation from this standard coin alignment could indicate a striking error or, in more troubling cases, a counterfeit. The weight should be verified on a calibrated digital scale and should register at exactly 5.67 grams, because any significant deviation could signal a wrong planchet error, where the Virginia design was struck on a blank intended for a different denomination, and these dramatic errors are among the most valuable and visually unmistakable discoveries in the series. The rim should be examined carefully for any signs of expansion, splitting, or irregular formation, because the collar die that shapes the rim during striking can occasionally malfunction, producing coins with incomplete, doubled, or expanded rims that are immediately recognizable to specialists, and that carry values far beyond what most people would ever associate with a coin that still spends as 25 cents. The value progression of the 2000p Virginia quarter tells a story that is as emotionally resonant as it is financially significant, because behind every documented sale there is a human moment, a moment where someone looked at a coin they had been carrying, spending, or ignoring, and suddenly realized that what they held was worth far more than they ever imagined. And for every one of those moments, there are countless others where the opportunity was missed entirely. Where the coin was spent on a cup of coffee, or lost in a couch cushion, or handed to a child who dropped it into a vending machine, never to be seen again. Minor errors, including circulated examples with verified die cracks or modest die deterioration doubling, that has been authenticated by a recognized grading service, have been documented at collector and auction prices, ranging from $900 to $2,000, figures that already represent an extraordinary return for a coin that was originally worth a quarter. And these numbers reflect the growing recognition among collectors that the State Quarters series, once dismissed as too common to hold serious value, contains specific varieties that have quietly achieved a level of desirability that would have seemed impossible when the program first began. Unusual misstrikes, such as coins with verified off-center strikes or partial collar errors, have reached approximately $3,000, and premium high-grade examples, particularly those certified at MS67 or higher with full original luster, complete strike detail, and exceptional eye appeal, have crossed the auction block at around $3,500. Numbers that begin to feel less like coin prices and more like the kind of money that arrives at exactly the right moment, the kind of money that covers an unexpected medical bill, replaces a failing appliance, or simply provides a breath of financial relief that most people spend years trying to earn. The upper tiers of this market are where the narrative reaches its most dramatic and emotionally charged territory, because strong mint-state error coins, those rare pieces that combine a significant production anomaly with pristine, uncirculated surface condition, have been recorded at auction results approaching $5,000, and rare misstrikes, including dramatic off-center examples where the design is visibly displaced and a significant portion of the planchet remains blank, have achieved documented values of approximately $6,000, representing a category of coin so unusual that most collectors will never encounter one in person despite years of active searching. Extraordinary collector examples, including coins with verified provenance connecting them to significant collections or major auction events, have reached approximately $6,500, and at the very summit of this market, exceptional or one-of-a-kind documented discoveries, coins with formal certification from top-tier grading services, population reports in the single digits, and a story of discovery that adds genuine historical narrative weight, have achieved auction and private sale results approaching $9,000, a sum that, for many Americans, represents the kind of money that could fund a year of college tuition, cover the down payment on a reliable vehicle, or provide a financial turning point that reshapes a family's sense of possibility and security. These values reflect documented auction or private sale results where applicable and are never guaranteed, because the numismatic marketplace is a living ecosystem shaped by collector demand, economic conditions, and the ongoing discovery of new varieties that can shift the landscape without warning. And anyone considering a transaction based on these figures should approach it with the understanding that the only true measure of a coin's worth is what a willing buyer and a willing seller agree upon at a specific moment in time. Professional authentication through a reputable grading service such as PCGS, NGC, or ANACS is absolutely essential before any sale or purchase, because the financial stakes are far too high to rely on untrained judgment, and the difference between a genuine error and a convincing postmint alteration can come down to metallurgical analysis and microscopic examination that only a professional laboratory can provide. So examine your coins carefully, weigh them precisely, study their surfaces under magnification, and remember that the most extraordinary discoveries often begin with nothing more than a decision to look at something ordinary with fresh and patient eyes. If you found this journey through the hidden world of pocket change treasures valuable, Take a moment to subscribe so you never miss the next remarkable discovery. Because as we have seen again and again, the coins that most people overlook every single day can carry secrets worth thousands of dollars. And the next life-changing find could already be sitting in your coin jar, your change drawer, or the bottom of your purse right now, waiting for nothing more than someone with the knowledge and the curiosity to finally see what has been there all along. And that brings us to the end of today's video. So thank you for watching. Keep examining those coins, and we will see you in the next one.